Oh, guys, good, you hear? I am so excited. Guess what? I hope this isn't about your podcast again. Why, did you finally listen to it?
You're listening to BYOTP Radio. Coming up next, the Groomer next door. The Groomer next door podcast.
Dun, 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 dun.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm everybody's friend.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled and informative episode of the Groomer Next Door podcast. I'm your host, Chris Green, and joining me in just a moment is Mary Emma. Mary Emma is with a Washington, D.C.-based organization called the Pet Food Institute, or PFI for short. PFI is comprised of Big Pet Food. Their board members consist of Ainsworth Pet Nutrition, American Nutrition, J.M. Smuckers, Blue Buffalo, CJ Foods, Central Garden, Diamond Pet, Fresh Pet, Hills Pet Nutrition, Mars Pet Care, Merrick Pet Care, Nestle Purina, Pro Pet, Simmons Pet Food, Spectrum Brands, Sunshine Mills, TFP Nutrition. They also have members that are also Big Pet Food who are Kibble Base. This week she is going to talk about what their organization does and different things in regulations. By that sound, Mary is making her way into the podcast studio. So, with that said, welcome Mary Emma from PFI.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
All right, this week we are joined by Mary Emma. She is with the Pet Food Institute, and I am really happy to be able to sit down and have this conversation with you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Well, I like to start every single episode with this one question, and that is, tell us the origin of Pet Food Institute.
Absolutely. And I would say a number of people don't know the origin story of the Pet Food Institute. It's been a organization in existence actually since 1958, established in Washington, D.C., and PFI is the trade association for the pet food and treat makers. So that means as the trade association, we serve as the industry voice in Washington, D.C., talking about science-based pet food regulations and policies. And I would say that many people say they haven't heard of us before, is that pets have been playing a larger role in our lives over more recent years, and PFI is starting to get out there more and talk more about this. The fact is that our pets are our children. My two dogs are my children, and we want to get out there and talk more about pet food.
All right. How does PFI work in watching and correcting safety for pet food?
So first let me step back and talk a little bit about how pet food is regulated. And I believe there's still this idea out there that pet food either isn't regulated, no one's watching what's going on, how pet food is made or what's going into pet food. So first I'll talk about how pet food is regulated real quickly. This starts at the federal level, and that is through the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA. And under that, pet food is regulated under the Food Safety Modernization Act. This is a sweeping food safety law that was signed into effect in 2011. Pet food is also regulated at the state level. You will find that through state registration requirements and state feed laws through the Association of American Feed Control Officials. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that PFI has been doing is working with our member companies, on implementation of FSMA, or the Food Safety Modernization Act, that federal law. Our members are the manufacturers of pet food. They represent about 98% of all the pet food that is made in the U.S. So we work with FDA to ensure that the laws under FSMA are implementable for our members, are science-based, and that our members understand their obligations under FSMA. In addition, we've been doing some outreach to some of the non-members as well. I recognize that there are a lot of different pet food makers out there beyond, the 98% of the market. And we've been working to communicate to them as well that they understand their obligations under the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. Because it's not just necessarily going to be the largest companies or the largest manufacturers that will be impacted by these food safety laws. So that's an example of ways that we've been working with our members and non-members to talk about pet food safety.
About a month and a half ago, Susan Thixton was in D.C. I do know that she did meet with the FDA. And the FDA and another pet parent who had lost a loved one all got together on the possibilities of restructuring certain pet food that's going to actually control the actual content and change it from pet food to pet feed. And you had just mentioned that. How much are you aware of that conversation of changing certain proteins that are considered to be pet feed to be in the labels in the bags or boxes, however it would be? And where are we currently in instituting this as being a new goal for all of us pet parents?
Mm-hmm. So if I am thinking of the same item, I am loosely familiar with what you are discussing. And I would say first and foremost, the most tragic thing that can happen is for one of our pets to die. Mm-hmm. And that should never happen to anybody. And my heart goes out to the woman who lost her pet. I mean, my heart absolutely goes out to her. If I remember correctly, I'm thinking about the petition that was discussed with FDA. And we're aware of that. And I believe we want the same goal here, which is a PFI, I should say, with that petition, is that for pet lovers and pet parents to know what's going into their pet's food. Mm-hmm. We have the same goal here. I think that petition might not be the best way to reach that goal. For example, we have regulation created now around human-grade pet food and what that means and definitions for human-grade. I believe that if we start adding in language such as pet feed, it adds to some of the confusion in terms of what's best for our pet and the pet's nutrition. And we're doing work now with PFI, I should say, and our members are doing work to support label modernization because we recognize the label as it is now can be confusing. And so we are supporting efforts because we want that to be something that pet parents can read and understand easily.
I walk down the aisles each time, and I will read a new bag, and each time a new product, it could be from the same big pet food company, comes out with a new product, it seems like the actual ingredients have become more scientific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I recognize that the label as it is now, I believe, might be a little outdated and doesn't reflect how we look at food labels in this day and age.
So how much involvement does PFI have in looking at what the possible labels will actually say? What's the language, mm-hmm. and how much do you guys have involved in that?
Sure. So one example would be the Association of American Feed Control Officials, or AFCO. This is a really important body that plays a role in pet food. They are not, it's worth noting, AFCO is not a regulatory body. Right. But they are comprised of state and federal regulators, and they draft model regulations that states can implement. So they create the quote-unquote model bill that will reflect, that can be incorporated into each state's law in terms of how they regulate pet food. So as part of this, there are actually discussions underway at AFCO looking at pet food label modernization. PFI actually serves as an advisor on AFCO. So this includes advisors are invited on board to participate. It could be industry or consumer groups to participate in some of these AFCO discussions. And that includes working on areas within label modernization. So some of those particular items that we're talking about right now and what AFCO is looking at on the pet food labels are what the nutrition facts box may look like, eating directions and nutritional adequacy statements, and ingredients and handling instructions. So those are some of the discussions that are going on right now within AFCO in terms of how that label modernization might look like.
How hard has it been with the recent launch of Pet Food? Is that made it difficult for you to actually be able to get your message out there?
You know, I actually would not say it's been making it difficult. I would say that it's created more opportunity for dialogue. You know, as I talked about in the beginning briefly, we are seeing an increased interest in wanting to know more about pet food. And it's due to a convergence, I believe, of two issues. One, the increasingly personal role that pets are playing in our life. And then also this, as you see, from human food to cosmetics, to other aspects, wanting to know more about the items we interact with or digest and expecting more transparency. And so it's been more opportunity for dialogue, which has, as you and I were talking about beforehand, is just an exciting opportunity to talk about it.
One thing that really did strike me is that I didn't see anything from veterinarians on there. I didn't see anything from your raw feed, and that was a curiosity. Is there a reason, and what was that reason?
Well, first and foremost, I would say we don't want to pick winners or losers in terms of what kind of food you want to provide for your dog or cat.
Right.
If you want to feed raw, feed raw. Our recommendation is I want guilt-free feeding. I don't want you to feel guilty when you are feeding your pet a certain kind of food. For example, though, with raw is just to consider and be aware of recommendations that have been put out there by veterinarians related to, handling raw pet food, and just to make sure it's complete and balanced, and that you're taking the steps to mitigate any risk of salmonella or E. coli, and to be aware of your pet's nutritional needs, and to make sure you're still providing your pet with that complete nutrition. Our members I'm trying to think. We have branched into more of we have a new member that, produces in the fresh space as well. And I certainly would, our members are required to follow the AFCO good manufacturing practices. That's our requirement for producer membership, And we encourage, again, this continued dialogue within the industry to talk about this.
It's the ingredients that I'm more or less having an issue with. And that's where, when I looked at your website, PFI's website, and it talks about ingredients and how it serves a function. The nutrition starts with crafted recipes. And you guys do discuss Mythbusters, but what I didn't notice is the deterrent of wheat, corn, and soy. And it's not there. There's no deterrent that, hey, this needs to be taken out. And I have noticed that your big pet food companies are now saying that, we are grain-free. But it's still there. And it's still on the bags. The problem is that, and I don't understand from PFI's standpoint why you guys haven't done anything to say, hey, this has to go. This is not right. What conversations have you guys had, if any, and any kind of direction is being made to stop all of this?
Well, you are accurate in that there certainly are products out there without carbohydrate sources such as corn or grain or wheat. They do exist. There's consumer requests for products without that, and our member companies certainly are helping to meet that demand for that consumer request without those ingredients. The fact is that corn, grain, wheat have gotten a bad rap. They are nutrient sources for pet food. When you're looking at a pet food recipe and or the ingredient list and you're trying to think about what's best for your pet, my recommendation is to think about the nutrients first and then pick the ingredients that you feel good about. For example, corn can provide protein. It's a protein source for pet food as well. And obviously that there are folks out there who don't want that, and they are totally welcome to buy food without that. But I would suggest not starting by looking at the ingredient list, and instead think about your pet's nutrition first.
But isn't that where everything starts, is ingredients? I mean, when I go into the market, my first thing I'm concerned with what's in my food. Looking at the list is probably the biggest thing that I have of questions to it. I can go down the list of people. I mean, you've got your Diamond, you got CJ Foods, you got Blue Buffalo, you got Smuckers, you got Mars, and you got Nestle, which is Nestle Purina, Royal Canin. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And that's where my next question is, how does somebody become a board member for PFI or just a member?
No, I hear you. The pet food space is a diverse space, and you will find products meeting every consumer request out there. Our membership is producer members, which would be companies whose primary business is making pet food or pet treats. We also have associate members who service the industry, whether it's an ingredient provider, for example, or a safety lab that does testing. They are all welcome to apply for membership to PFI. It's reviewed internally and up for discussion. So any of these organizations are certainly welcome to apply.
But up for discussion. I mean, see, that's where
Yeah,
that's what I always wonder. What is that like? How does that decided? Is that something? Is it by board members? Is it by PFI? Is it by just members? How is the committee chosen to actually let in newcomers?
I mean, it's up for up for vote by the board.
Okay, so it is by board.
Yeah.
So once you're in the actual club, that's when you can decide your next people coming in. And now the part that I of course wonder is how much of their influence goes into the regulatory portion of each product.
Well, for example, it would be talking about what PFI's message would be at the AFCO meeting. How a message would be presented to the regulators who help draft that model bill that's implemented in the state. The fact is that pet food, there are still regulators. There is the goalie there at the federal level and at the state level.
Now, with PFI, you guys itself, there is somebody representing PFI at all of these board meetings that are internal with PFI. And is that just kind of them, or is there somebody from your organization that's actually sitting in and saying, okay, well, this has to be done and this has to be done, and then we can put it to a vote? Or is it just... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
It's participating in the discussions. It's, it's obviously, we're member driven. So they have the opportunity to help discuss what are the issues that are important to the industry. For example, talking about FSMA implementation and how to handle that and how to communicate that across the industry. So those are discussions with, leadership and our board of directors.
Now, when you say FSMA, what does that stand for?
Food Safety Modernization Act. This is the federal regulation.
Okay. All right. A lot of people attest PFI as a lobbyist. They don't think that you guys are anything more than just that. What is your take on it, and is it accurate or is it inaccurate?
Well, as a trade association, we certainly do have a voice here in Washington, D.C. That means, for example, I'm trying to think in terms of, let's say, issues on the Hill that might play a role, such as FDA funding and making sure that FDA has enough money to implement the Food Safety Modernization Act. We're out there, talking about pet food safety and nutrition. Again, the message of wanting guilt-free eating. And so steps to get out there and talk about that so that pet owners are informed as they make their own purchasing decisions. Another item, for example, that we do as an industry is talking around pet food safety. One of the items that we do every year is bring together our producer members to talk about their lessons, their research that's been going on safety, on issues related to, let's say, salmonella and salmonella reduction and reaching that zero tolerance for salmonella in pet food. And our members come together to talk about practices and what they've learned and how we as an industry can continue to get better as on that front, because our members are not competitive on safety.
Now with recent, and I'm not even going to go backwards. I'm not looking to even jump back 10 years. I'm looking to jump just this year alone with pentobarbital being a big player. That was a huge issue. And from all intents and purposes, it was just a matter of picking up the actual person who was selling the actual protein misrepresented themselves. But with that said, what are the standards internally with PFI that are saying, hey, we got to make sure everything is up to the exact quality it should be? How much conversation goes into this on a weekly, monthly, or even yearly basis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm familiar with the situation that you're talking about. That was not a member company of ours, so I cannot attest to exactly what happened there, though it does sound like it was the use of a euthanized farm animal as a meat ingredient, as I understand it at the moment. I will tell you, our members do not, they use meat that has been slaughtered. So this is meat that's being slaughtered for human consumption. This is a practice we've talked about, and pet food makers, what they are doing is talking with their ingredient suppliers, setting up specifications, and identifying what those trusted ingredient suppliers are. That scenario that you talked about was a tragic scenario. This is the one where the dog died, and that is absolutely awful. And our companies play a role in talking and communicating with their ingredient suppliers to set those standards and their specifications.
We even said this beforehand, before we even started recording, about talking in public with different people, and how many conversations do you guys have with them, if any?
It's definitely been part of our discussions as we talk about what the industry does. We are talking about members of our family and their well-being. We are feeding the sole source of nutrition for our dogs and cats. And that's a great responsibility. And I'll tell you, they know their responsibility. They are pet owners. They are pet lovers. You go to their offices, it's pets everywhere. And it's talking about how we can communicate differently so that this new expectation for full transparency can be met.
The advertisement from some of these companies talk about their new product has come out, and it is across the board negative response, and they're never responding. And how hard has it been for you guys to have to absorb a lot of that negative comments from them?
And we do communicate in a new era. You are absolutely correct. It's an era of feedback. It's an era of expecting communication, and it's an era of exchanging information. So I absolutely agree with you, and I think is further part of what PFI is doing, which is trying to get some of that information further out there, whether it's through some of the videos we've done or through our social media, just to help make that your independent but informed decision.
Now, when you say making videos and stuff like that, what is it that you guys are doing? Because I know, and I'd like to discuss Super Zoo and what you guys did there, because like I said, I heard of the invitations, and I'd love to hear from your perspective what went on and how that went. Because again, I want to make sure that I don't paint you in such a terrible light, and I want to know all of your positive movements that you're actually making.
So I actually was not at Super Zoo. My boss was, of all people.
That's
but I heard
fair.
good things. I heard very good things. And no, I agree. It's the leaning in to some of these discussions and recognizing that there's different viewpoints on our pets and how to raise our pets, and recognizing that, and just discussing what some of the information is that's out there. One of the items that we did, one of the questions we just got all the time a year ago was, how's pet food made? How's pet food made? And there wasn't a ton of information out there that reflected modern pet food manufacturing. So, for example, we did a video looking at the pet food manufacturing process from, identifying ingredient suppliers through the packaging process, through how it's regulated, talking about some of the regulation that plays a role along the way. So, example of some of the ways that we can just help provide some information so that you can make a fully informed decision when selecting for your family.
Now, we talked about this before we went on and recorded, so I wanted to ask a question that I ask everybody who is involved with pet food. It's something that I do, and I love to ask this question because everybody gives a different response. And mine is soapboxing. Now, if anybody's ever heard me talk about soapboxing, it's the simple fact that anytime I go into a big departments, big pet food store, big box store, whatever, I have conversations. And it's just simply by people in pet food aisles. You had said that when you go to the dog park, you have a lot of conversations. We're getting a dog park finally over here. I will, of course, have dog food conversations, and I have them, and I love having them. But I love to know everybody's soapboxing moment. When you're out, somebody asks you about pet food. You don't have to say the brand, but if somebody asks you, what is your moment, and you're like, you need to look out for an XYZ.
What do I tell them to look out for?
Yeah, what is your soapbox moment? What is it that gets you that you're like, you know what, I want you to make sure, or it doesn't have to be about pet food, but, obviously it's in discussion.
Yeah, no, I would say the two things I always ask, and I'm glad you raised that because everyone's, the folks that, I have the regular dog park morning crew, so we all know each other, and when someone new comes, the regulars all roll their eyes when they hear me start going, and, or there she goes again. My question is he a puppy? Yes or no? Are you giving them puppy food? Yes or no? Is it a complete and balanced recipe? Is it providing those 40-plus nutrients that a dog, or a cat, I should say. Sorry, I have a dog bias. I always incorporate them in my stories. Is it providing the 40-plus nutrients that your dog or cat requires? And is it for that life stage? Because, for example, puppies might need more fat than an adult dog does need. And an adult dog will need less fat. Otherwise, weight gain can become an issue. Mm-hmm. And if they say, for example, I make the food at home, which is a totally fine choice. Are you making sure, is this a recipe that's been vetted for nutritional adequacy? Are you still sure that you're getting those nutrients that can, have a detrimental impact on your pet's quality of life if you're lacking in a certain nutrient? And I could soapbox on that all day, every day.
And see, it's in a sense that's kind of where I go. Now, one thing that always gets me, and it's definitely going to go in the realm of PFI, and I'm going to take it pretty much back almost to its beginning of its origin. And that is, I did a thing last week where I posted a bunch of old commercials from dog food. And mm-hmm. the one thing I can exactly pinpoint is that and again, a lot of it's black and white, but you can see this clearly, and that is you see real meat, not this artificial product that's out there right now. You can see it with whether it's looking at Gravy Train even. It looks almost real. Now, of course, I understand that not everything's going to, I'm not looking at the ingredients entirely, but there's definitely been a decline in the actual food. And it's interesting. Another thing that I've noticed is more people would have fed table scraps, whether it's in the 50s, 40s, whatever, all the way up even into the 80s when I was a kid and 90s when I was a teenager, and it started to slow down. So, in some sense, a lot of dogs were getting their proteins, which were human grade. They were getting a lot of different foods and vegetables that, of course, all of us kids would give our dogs, and then all of a sudden something changed. where there had been this myth that you have to go into the science of these pet food companies to only feed this grade. Now, question is, what have you seen over that time? And of course, being in the realm you're in, you've of course been able to look at archives and see different things. What has changed in your perspective as well?
Well, I think our understanding of pet nutrition has changed greatly over the past 50, 60 years, and understanding all the nutrients that are required. Again, we as humans will get our nutrients from a range of, what we graze on and snack on throughout the day. That's how we get our diet. If you want to eat McDonald's every day, as every meal, you're welcome to, but be aware that you might not be getting all those full nutrition. For those who do feed, commercial pet food at home, this is your pet's sole source of nutrition. Whereas we graze, if someone elects to feed commercial pet food to their dog or cat, that's the only place where they're going to get all of those nutrients that they require. And so what we've been seeing is better understanding of the nutrition, what the minimums and maximums are for these. You can have toxicity if you have too much of a certain thing, or how it could hurt your pet if you are lacking in certain nutrients. So you're seeing better understanding. I mean, science is not static. That's the fact. And better understanding of the nutrition that helps our pets enjoy their best life.
The only thing with the science portion is that we're noticing more puppy, mid-dog age, and elderly age dogs that have obesity, they have health issues, they have more chronic problems now than they ever did. And my question has always been, it comes back to we stopped table scrapping. And again, it was that bringing it back to a biologically appropriate diet by taking that off the table, no pun intended, but by doing that caused more issues, which I kind of have that same, drawback in the front and in the back and everywhere else in my mind, saying it was remembering, hearing all of these different commercials, all these different ad spaces, that we have the products your dogs have to have. Even to this day, I'm still seeing these commercials. We have the product your dog needs. Same thing with cats. I mean, UTIs because food is not supposed to be like this. Cats are, I think it's 95% carnivore, and yet their food is dehydrated, so they have no liquid in it. And it's a known fact. And that's the science. And I just I hit myself in the head going, this is right there. I'm not a vet, but I can see it as well. I've done the research. It's why I want to talk to them. And it's why I like having the conversation with you, because I'm not berating you. It's the question of, how is this appropriate? How is this not something that's drawn into a boardroom saying, hey, look, we have the scientific report in front of us. This is inadequate. This should not be. These proteins shouldn't be. These vegetables, this here, this there, this chemical, it shouldn't be. And it raises that question of, we got the science. Why are they still doing it? Just curiosity.
I mean, yeah, no, I'm just, I hear what you're saying on that. The one thing of table scrapping I would add too is just to be aware of, for example, though, a lot of the foods, a number of the foods that we eat can also be toxic for pets. So for example, the onion in it, or the raisins, being conscious of that as well and what that can play a role in toxicity for your pet.
And I'm 100% with you. I mean, we got the holidays right around the corner, scary as that may be. And it caught me off guard as well. But, we have Thanksgiving, which is very, very fatal. Because, again, you have family over and, hey, there's our dog and, hey, there's some food coming around. Yes, yeah. I get that. Christmas, same thing.
And
so many different things. But that's one day out of the year, or 2 days, let's say 2 days out of the year, that this really is an issue. Now, when a recall comes out, do you guys all have to get together and discuss, or is that something that's just kind of in-house, whatever company it is that's having it?
Recalls often are certainly something that I pay attention to, and something that I understand pet parents certainly pay attention to. Typically, that's handled on a company-by-company basis, depending on what happened and how they are handling that recall, and what the instance was that led to that recall.
Does that ever become something that you have a conversation with? Does it pop up on message and it's like, okay, this happened, I have to call them up and find out, or is that just, again, an in-house type thing? Because I'm very interested. I'm very interested in recalls.
And I absolutely try and learn more about it. One of the items we actually did this year, for your reference, was talk a little bit about the fact that this was 10 years since the melamine recalls, which was from 2007, which I imagine you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a absolutely tragic moment for the industry, and it was also a game changer for the industry. And we went out there to talk about what happened, why it happened, and what changed. And, it was an opportunity to talk about the recall, because the fact is that it's something that's still on some people's minds, and we recognize that.
Yeah, it's definitely on my mind. I mean, again, I know a lot of people have knocked it around. Obviously, I would almost be... I'd be amiss by not talking about it, but on the same side, it's been talked about a lot, and that is, you're right, it had opened up a lot of eyes, but I think it also was the one major component that made everybody, including myself, wake up and realize that something's wrong, and that was the big kicker.
Well, and I think it reflected also a convergence of social media playing a bigger role in our life, and we're able to talk and share information with each other and communicate with each other to a much greater degree than we had before. And then this desire for more information, learning more about how it's made, what goes into it, what happened, and that was certainly, I believe, what we saw in 2007, which was absolutely a game changer for the industry.
Now, from your perspective, from PFI's perspective, what changed in-house? What were things that you guys said, okay, well, because of this, it's 2007, let's go back to that point. What changes were made internally?
Within the industry?
Nope, within Pet Food Institute.
Well, we don't manufacture pet food.
I understand that.
Okay.
But any kind of regulations you put on your board members or on members, anything you guys said, okay, well, we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again, so you're obligated to XYZ. Was there any?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of our conditions of membership is to follow establish current good manufacturing practices, which are in existence under ASCO, the Association of American Feed Control Officials, and now also a federal requirement under the Food Safety Modernization Act. Those are steps that, for example, play a role in looking at a facility, looking at the condition of the facility, and ensuring that it's up to the hygienic standards.
Now, this is going to be a two-part question, but with the standards of the facility, a lot of facilities are not in the U.S., so they're not obligated to actually uphold our FDA. Mm-hmm. Just recently, we had an issue with proteins that were tainted in Brazil, South America, and of course, we all have the same thing. If it's in Asia and all, we all worry. If it says China, there's a question. If it's anything that's outside the U.S., we know, as pet parents, there's no FDA regulations to it. So that's my big thing. That's another big thing with me is how do you regulate that when your board members are actually outsourcing all of their manufacturing obligations? And then the other part of that, and I can repeat this one afterwards, is what are all of the actual requirements to join Pet Food Institute? Because we went over the actual production, but what else is actually required?
Yeah. So I would say first and foremost, among our members, the vast majority of the ingredients are sourced in the U.S. I know that this is something that people like to ask and are concerned about. So I do just want to put it out there. The majority of the ingredients are sourced in the U.S. For those that aren't, that might be imported foods, this actually now falls under that federal law, Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. There's a section under FSMA called the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. And under that, importers, so those who bring in foreign ingredients, must evaluate safety factors, such as the food safety history of food they're bringing in, and look at those steps as well. So audits of facilities, sampling and testing of incoming food, and again, a review of their history. So just to let you know a little bit in terms of the regulation for imported food and what that looks like and how those ingredients do come in. So I did want to address that first. So as I mentioned, to be a PFI member, it is that you must follow current good manufacturing processes under ASCO, and your primary business is making pet food or treats.
Okay.
Yep, and application submissions are welcome.
I was just wondering, was there an extension to that? Was there more? Was there requirements besides that? And the other part is does recalls, does that hold any kind of demotion to the possibilities? Is that something that could actually rule against a company joining PFI?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think their safety history might play a role in terms of discussions that go into voting on membership, for example. Being a good actor in the industry. I mean, we don't want the bad actors playing a prominent role in the industry.
And, this is where I will leave my personal opinion out on that one, because again, I want to stay neutral to it. I look at it and go, boy, again, I'd love to see more of the actual players, and as you refer to them as actors, being some of them that were more in the new age, not the scientific age, because again, and I think we can both agree on pet food, and when it comes to the kibble side, which is predominantly, I think it's 100% of your members, it is all science. It's all really Star Wars sci-fi type product that's out there. It's generated in a lab, and I commend them. They put out billions of dollars a year in research and in packaging. It's just, again, we have to do our due diligence by reading the ingredients and deciphering it if we can. Thank goodness we have Google. Final thing I wanted to ask is, what is it that we haven't covered? What are some things that you would like to mention that I haven't covered?
I would just suggest, if obviously your listeners are going to be the ones that want to know more about pet food. PFI is making the concerted effort to be that information source. So, go to our website at petfoodinstitute.org or on Twitter at USPetFood. We're trying to, again, provide that information so that you can make the best decision for your pet.
Gotcha. Well, this has been this episode for the Groomer Next Door podcast with Mary Emma. And I am Chris Green. Have a pet-tastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, guys, my bedtime.